Hi everyone, welcome back to Journeying with Janay, where we turn pain into purpose. On last week's episode, I told you that at the beginning of every episode, we will do something new called a Janay Fact. And a Janay Fact is simply a fact about myself where you get to learn more about me as each episode unfolds. With that being said, today's Janay Fact is that I actually did not like my name. My mom, when she was pregnant with me, she just knew I was going to be a girl, and she came up with the name Janay Carolyn. Janay, I always say, Mama, where did you get that name from? It's so common. And she was like, well, I didn't really hear it much in 1996, so I loved it, and I decided to name you Janay. Carolyn comes from my dad's oldest sister who passed away in 1988 of ovarian cancer. Her name was Carolyn, so I always loved my middle name, but could not stand my first name. I just thought it was too common and overdone. So last week I was watching a podcast called the Love Hour Podcast with Kevin and Melissa Fredericks. Love their podcast, and a lady was on there, Tabitha Brown, and she was speaking about how her mom named her Tabitha from Bewitched, and her mom didn't know anything about the name Tabitha, heard it on there and loved it, named her Tabitha. So she was saying as she got older, she actually found out what her name meant, and her name was in the Bible. So I said, well, for the luck of it, let me just go and look up my name and see what my name means. And surprisingly, my name derives from the Hebrew, and it means that God is gracious, or God's gracious gift. And I literally called my mom. It was like 2 a.m. She thought something was wrong, but she was like, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing's wrong, but I have to apologize to you. And she was like, for what? I was like, because for so long, I was like, Mama, why you name me Janay? It's so common. I really don't like it. I wish you would name me something different. But I found out that my name means God's gracious gift. So, or God is gracious. So I'm like, how can I hate that? Because God's grace and mercy is something we need every day. So with that being said, today's episode is entitled My Diagnosis Saved My Life. And for some of y'all may be wondering, like, girl, how could a diagnosis save your life? It's debilitating. And for those of you who don't know, my diagnosis is fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia at age 16. So if you have not watched episode 1 of Journeying with Janay, which is on fibromyalgia awareness, I encourage you to go back and watch it so you can hear in detail kind of what I go through on a daily basis and how my life has been with fibromyalgia. But I'll give you a little short summary. Fibromyalgia is a disease, a chronic pain disease that you have pain from all over your whole body. It attacks your joints and the muscles in your body. It causes insomnia, sleep deprivation, headaches, memory loss. So it has a lot of different things that culminates the disease. But I want you all to go back and watch episode 1 if you have not done so you can really get a better understanding of what fibromyalgia is. But like I said, today's episode is entitled My Diagnosis Saved My Life. So let's get into that. So first of all, most people will be saying, how could you say that your diagnosis saved your life? Well, I'm going to give you a little backstory first on my life pre-diagnosis, then to my life post-diagnosis and why I feel it saved my life. So as I always tell y'all, I have my notes so I don't forget anything. And so first, before my diagnosis, like I said, was a normal child. Well, at that point, teenager, in school, going to school, involved in band, involved in clubs, AB honor roll. Everything was going amazing until one day started having this pain out of nowhere, not understanding, was barely able to walk or to talk, and just really could not function. So finally going to the doctor and finding out that I had fibromyalgia. So in that moment, my world came crashing down. I was 16, but being a planner, I always planned. I was going to UL. I was going to do 2 years there because I wanted to be a pharmacist. And then I was going to either go to Xavier, ULM, get my pharmacy degree, and start practicing. Girl, I started looking for apartments. I made a list of what was going to be in my apartment. Like, I was really ready at 16. And God was like, nope, that's not happening. I have something else for you to do. But I always say God has a very unusual way of getting our attention. In my opinion, his unusual way was fibromyalgia. But at 16 and even until probably not even 2 years ago, I did not have that outlook on life. until, as I told y'all before in episode 1, I started going to therapy and started learning how to do positive reframing. So when I first was diagnosed, I felt like I lost all my purpose. I had really no reason left to be here. Some nights I would literally be in so much pain and up crying and just like, God, why did you leave me here if you want me to be in so much pain? Why didn't you not take me? I'm like, God, if you want to, you could come take me tonight. I'm fine with it as long as I can get out of this pain, because at some points it was just so unbearable to deal with and to go through. And so at that point I was like, now my dreams of going to school, I can't do that, because at this point I can barely get out the bed without assistance from my parents or feed myself. So I'm like, what is my purpose now, God? I have no purpose. I have no reason to be here. I lost my self-esteem because I'm like, who would want to be bothered with me or be friends with me or even going to dating and marriage? Because I always thought ahead and was like, nobody is going to want to deal with this every day of their lives. So I was just at a very, very low point in my life. I lost my purpose. I lost my joy. I lost my peace. I honestly lost God. And I had a crisis of faith, which we somewhat tapped on in episode 1 with fibromyalgia awareness. I had a crisis of faith. I didn't know what it was then, but I have the language now to know what it is. And just to admit, I was honestly so angry with God. Like I said before, I was like, why would you even leave me here to be in this much pain and to put my body through all of this? God, just take me if this is what the rest of my life is going to be, because fibromyalgia doesn't have a cure and there's only medicine to help with the pain. And so in that moment, once I had the crisis of faith, and kind of fast forwarding about 2 to 3 years after my diagnosis, I was in a crisis of faith. I really didn't want to live anymore, honestly. I just got out of an extremely toxic relationship, and I was so lost, and I didn't know what to do. So most people would see me, I would walk around with this facade of perfectionism, as we talked in the last episode. I would always just want to be perfect so I could be in pain, and people like, how are you doing? Oh girl, I'm good. But deep down inside, it's like I'm about to fall because I'm numb and I can't feel my legs. And I would just be perfect to others outside, but when I was home, I would be sad, I would be depressed, I would be angry, I would be frustrated, and just trying to make it through my daily life. And then the person that I would always go to and turn to, which is God, I couldn't pray anymore because I just felt so mad and so angry. I'm like, I can't even pray anymore. I can't worship anymore. I can't do any of the things that usually bring me peace. So not only was I sad and was I depressed and in physical pain, but I was in emotional pain and I was in spiritual pain because I lost my connection with God, and I really didn't know how to get that connection back until I took the time to really start to get to know myself and go into therapy and listening to Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts. And she was preaching a few sermons that she talked about it's okay to have a crisis of faith. It's okay to say, God, I'm upset because you were allowing me to go through these things. And until then, that's when I didn't realize, 1, that it was okay to even say that. 2, that it was okay to cry out to God in such a manner. And 3, that it's just like any relationship, earthly relationship, I can reconnect with my Heavenly Father. So I finally had the tools and the knowledge and the verbiage to have the reconciliation. So I had a reconciliation with God, and I simply prayed to him a prayer that she told me to pray in her sermon. She told everybody to pray this prayer, and she talked about Hannah and how Hannah couldn't conceive a child, and how she prayed and she cried and she gave her bitterness to God and she gave her sorrow to God, and she said, God, in exchange for my sorrow, give me seed, and the seed that you give me, the fruit that comes from that seed, I will give it back to you. And I prayed that simple prayer that, God, I'm giving all my bitterness, all my anger, all my frustration, all my pain, all my sorrow. I'm giving it to you, and I want you to in turn give me a seed. And I'm going to plant that seed and grow that seed and water that seed. And the fruit that comes from that seed, I'm going to give back to you. Which out of that prayer that I prayed, birthed Journeying with Janay and put me here where I am today. And one of the things that is extremely important to my growth and to my healing is journaling. And so I wrote some things down because I went back to a journal when it finally clicked for me that, hey, my diagnosis didn't harm my life. It might have made it uncomfortable in some ways, but it actually saved my life. And I started to go back and list all of the things that I've learned since being diagnosed. And it was so powerful just to see how things have changed so many times. And I have changed as a person just because of this one simple diagnosis of fibromyalgia that I thought I couldn't live with. But now I know it was just God using it to shape and mold me into, in turn, save my life. So I wrote down some things. It's about 6 things that I wrote a list down of things that has changed since my fibromyalgia. So the first one is God had to sit me down and make me work on myself. So as I stated before, some days I can't get out the bed. And even then, when I was first diagnosed, my body just getting used to medicines and the pain, I couldn't get out the bed for like months at a time. And so God really like set me down. After I got over being upset and had the reconciliation with him, I started to see myself. I started to work on myself. I started to go to therapy. And so if it wouldn't be for that, I would have been so busy with school and other things, with the things that I had planned to do, that I wouldn't have had the time to really connect with God. So the first one is that he sit me down and I had to look in the mirror, because I had a lot of time where all I can do was think. So I kind of had to have that mirror experience and look back at myself and say, okay, you're not perfect. There's things you do need to work on. And so I took that time to work on myself, and still taking that time to work on myself and to go to therapy. The second thing I want to talk about is, if you're a person of faith, you know that Paul said he had a thorn in his flesh. And he sought God to remove the thorn. And he sought him 3 times. And then after, he said, God, I've sought you 3 times. You never removed the thorn. And God said, but it's there to buffet you. Which simply means it's just there to mold you. And I can honestly say, without me having fibromyalgia and God sitting me down to work, for me to work on myself and to allow him to work on me, I would not be who I am today. I would still have a foul attitude. I would still be a person that think I had to be perfect and everybody else around me had to be perfect. So God have this thorn, which is the fibromyalgia, there to buffet me. And he, just as he told Paul, I always remind myself that his grace is sufficient. So I just think of that as well. So that's the second way that I feel that fibromyalgia saved my life, or my diagnosis saved my life. The third reason is it allowed me to recognize my true value. And you probably heard me say a little bit earlier that I got out of a toxic relationship and I was dealing with some other things, and I lost my value. I lost my purpose. I thought, because I have this diagnosis, now I'm no good to anyone, not to myself and not to anyone else. And for a while, I felt that I literally had no value. I had no purpose. My life was nothing, until doing the work and seeing you have so much to offer. And just because you have this diagnosis doesn't mean that's who you are. You're not Janay, the person who has fibromyalgia, the person who can't get out the bed some days. You're Janay, a person who's loving, who's caring, who's compassionate, who can turn her pain into purpose and use it to help others. So it truly allowed me to realize my true value. And another thing, it allowed me to discover my purpose and my path of destiny. Not only with my career aspirations, because as I spoke before, I wanted to do pharmacy, and I wanted to do it because it's like, okay, I want to do something good and make sure I'm bringing in enough money and it's a substantial job and what people's going to think is a good thing or a good job. And so I was like, pharmacy would be great, but that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I love to decorate. I love to plan things. And so on my career, it put me on that path, as well as what I feel is my true purpose, which is sitting in front of this camera, speaking to you guys and speaking into people's lives to encourage you to say you can turn pain into purpose. You can have a diagnosis, but still have a great life. So that is another thing. It definitely put me on my path to my purpose and to my destiny. So that was one of the biggest things, that how it saved my life, and one of the things that I am most grateful for that fibromyalgia did. And the last thing is, it set me free of old thoughts and ideas. And when I say that, and I say that one for last, because before this, I have to admit I was a judgmental person. Before, I told you I can have a nasty attitude sometimes. I can snap easily. I projected my perfectionism onto others. And I had so many old thoughts and ideas, not only about my life and other people, but just about things in general, about relationships, about God. I thought that one, to be a Christian, you had to be this perfect put together person. But I was finally able to see that, hey, Christians go through things. They break. They're gonna have broken times. They're gonna have broken pieces. That we're not perfect people, but through God, He helps us and He molds us. And like I said before, His grace is sufficient. So I was able to be like, okay, it's okay for me to be broken. It's okay for me to hurt and still be a Christian. It's okay for me to have a crisis of faith and a reconciliation with God and still be a Christian. So it set me free of that perfect Christian idea. It set me free also in relationships, to know that, because of course in life and as a female, but especially in the South, we're kind of like, from young we're taught to make sure you know how to cook, make sure you know how to do this, you know the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, make sure you know how to clean. And for so long, I always thought like, okay, I need to know how to do all of this so I can be able to have a husband one day and I can be desirable to someone. And to make sure you have somebody who's going to protect and provide, and kind of having those at the top of the list. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with one of my friends, which she's more like a sister than a friend, and we started talking about men being the prize and not the purpose, which is an episode that is going to come really soon with her and I. And it started to teach me now, with all the work I've been doing, that I need to look for a partner and not a provider or a protector. Because if I have a partner and we come together in a partnership and we're like-minded, all of those other things are going to come. Because in a partnership, y'all coming together to make for one common goal. So all of those other things are going to come. So it kind of tore down some old things that I thought about relationships and what I thought I should be looking for in a mate. But most of all, it tore down that beyond me just being a woman, beyond me one day just being somebody's wife or somebody's mother, I have value and I have purpose. And so today, for whoever's watching, you may have fibromyalgia, you may not. But everybody has some type of diagnosis, whether it's a medical diagnosis, whether it's a mental illness, or it's something that you have not exactly been diagnosed with, but it's something that's in your life that bothers you. Try thinking about it differently. Try not to look at it as my diagnosis changed my life or my diagnosis ruined my life, because yes, it will change your life, it will change the way you do things, but try to let it change you for the better. It doesn't ruin your life if you really take the time to be introspective. If you take the time to do the positive reframing, you will actually see how your diagnosis will save your life. And I can honestly say the Janay at 16 and the Janay now at 23 are two totally different people. The Janay at 16 didn't even like her name, didn't even want to say the name Janay, because I just didn't like it. I thought it was too common and too generic. But the Janay now loves it because she know it means God is gracious. The Janay then would be terrified to speak in front of people, even though I like to talk. But the Janay now knows that it's not what I'm saying. It's not the amount that I talk, or it's not that I'm in front of the camera. It is what I'm saying to encourage someone. So I encourage anybody out there today, whatever your diagnosis is, do not allow it to stop you. And it may stop you some temporarily, should I say, or momentarily, but don't allow it to stop you forever. Find the positive in it, learn from it, grow from it, and allow it to make you become a better person. So allow your diagnosis to save your life, just like my diagnosis saved mine. So as with every episode, I really hope that today this encouraged someone. I hope that now you will have a different outlook on whatever thing that you have been diagnosed with. I hope that it helps you. And most of all, I really truly thank you for coming with me on this journey as we turn pain into purpose. Bye.